Hey everyone, welcome to Book of Katherine. I'm really glad to have you with me. So today I'm just going to do hopefully a short little video for my doctors. I know I have a lot of you out there and I know you just saw me kind of go through a big procedure, and I am not going to get into a bunch of, details about my health. Well, yes I am, just a little bit. But I wanted to just share with you some things that I've learned, not just over this procedure, but some things that have dawned on me over this last procedure. And kind of like a number of puzzle pieces that click together. Because I don't know if you've noticed, if you go back to the very beginning of my channel, which was exactly a year ago, this is August. We are literally at a year. It's a birthday for my YouTube channel. And if you saw me a year ago, you would see that I look dramatically different. Like I remember a video that I did where I cried because I could put on a shirt. I was so happy that I could put on a shirt. And it was such a change. It was like such a good day that I could put on a shirt. And I couldn't get out of bed. I could only film in bed. And here we are. And yesterday I went through the yard. We went on a drive and I was able to sit in the front seat. It was not easy. It was not easy. But I sat in the front seat of a car that I have not been able to drive in. I've had to sit in the more comfortable car in the back. But when we were driving, we'd sit in that. When I tried practicing sitting in the front seat, I had driving that car. So then we got to switch over to the other car. And my husband was like, I don't think you've been in this since last. And we calculated it out, and it was last October I had been in that car. Last October. And I thought that was 6 months ago. No, that's like a year ago. So I got into that car in the front seat, and when we got out of it, I walked around the yard, and I picked up branches. I picked up branches about twice the length of me, and I tossed them into our branch pile. I cleaned up the whole entire length, like in front of my house, of branches. Like Lila just walked alongside me and I just went through and I did yard work. I did yard work. Now granted, all of the branches were on the side of a hill, so like I didn't have to bend as far, like I didn't have to work the hips. But that's not a level 12 of lower extremity. Like I walked up and down and I tossed. And my husband just sat on the porch and watched in awe. And I was in awe. It was just this brief moment, And then I had to spend today in bed. But, I mean, this is a dramatic, and then, but then I'm filming now. I mean, this is a dramatic lifestyle change. I haven't been able to do yard work since 8 years ago. Not since California. No yard work. That's been gone from my life completely. So I wanted to tell you some things that clicked for me. Did you know, I don't know if you're aware of this, but did you know that by law, the lobbyists in Congress for the pharmaceutical companies, they passed a law that says that pharmacies cannot inform patients if a drug is cheaper by cash than their copay. That was passed because the majority of drugs that our prescriptions are made of, the majority of prescriptions, something like 60 to 70% of all prescriptions written, are cheaper by cash than the copays today. So they passed a law that says a pharmacy cannot inform the patient. And if patients are watching right now, they're probably like, what? Now, a patient can ask the pharmacy and say, how much is this by cash? But they have to ask every single time with every single prescription. And it gets hard because we're at the pharmacy every other day for my prescriptions. I have a lot of prescriptions. Now, I know my prescriptions haven't changed in like a year, which is great. You know, I think we've only had one added, but would few have dropped. But I mean, our prescriptions are pretty steady. But I just found that out last month. And I've been on about 30 prescriptions in the last 8 years. I don't know if you've seen the documentary in New Zealand. Like, America pays more for its drugs than any other nation worldwide. Canada second. And, you know, our healthcare doesn't reflect that. Like, Americans, we have the worst rate in the world for how much we pay versus how much as time goes on, our rate of pay goes up, but our level of actual health goes down. So we spend more and more and more on our health, but our actual health is getting worse and worse and worse. And yet, what changed over this last year? Did my drugs change? No, my drugs didn't change. After 8 years and doctors saying, well, we don't want to touch your body. Last year, I finally said to a doctor, and I'd never done this before, I said, why aren't you injecting my spine? Why aren't you injecting my spine? And the reason I said that is because I had started to say to my husband, I think I feel myself dying. And I didn't know about that statistic, that if you don't move, you die. And if you've seen my previous videos, you know how little my mobility is and how little muscle I have left. It took a month for me to be able to lift my leg up. Like, just lift my leg up 6 times in a row without, you know, going into full shudders, you know. And it takes an enormous effort and time to try and do that twice. You know, a month of physical therapy every day, not taking breaks, you know, except for when I go to my doctor. That's how little muscle mass I had left from not moving. You can't go 8 years. In fact, most people deteriorate much more quickly. The only reason I didn't deteriorate that fast is because I was a pro dancer, you know, and I traveled a ton in the middle of the day. For what I did during the day was standing. My consulting had me standing during the day. It was always moving. My entire lifestyle was moving. Consulting during the day, standing up, teaching, and then at night, teaching dance and, you know, moving and then competing, you know? So it was like constantly moving my body. I had a very strong body. That's the only one kept me for 8 years. But by the end of 8 years, I felt this last, and I started saying, like, I feel something changing. I felt like this wind, and I was like, something's going really, really wrong. And I started pushing in a way that I hadn't pushed before. Of like, oh, okay. So, sorry. So, somebody called. Get to see me stare off into space for a little while. Okay, so when I pushed for a way that I hadn't pushed before, and he wasn't even looking at me. It was not a good doctor. Like, I just was like, I was like shoved through anyway. And I was like, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you touching my body? I didn't care if he got upset with me. I was just like, why aren't you injecting? And he just was like, we need one place. You're bad all over. He's like, you don't have one place that's bad. We can't inject everywhere. You're bad everywhere. We need one place that's bad. We don't know where to start. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm bad everywhere. And so I just kind of took that information, and for the rest of the summer, I was like paying attention to like where I'm bad the worst. I did that, you know, and I figured it out. I figured out where I was bad the worst. And then that's when procedures happen, of course, unfortunately. And I really do wonder if a procedure wouldn't have happened if I hadn't actually collapsed in the doctor's waiting room, which had never happened before. I collapsed and started having one of my in the doctor's waiting room. And I was like, and it never happened before. No, it had happened once before. With the doctor who thought I should have she thought I should have surgery, and then no one would take me because I had other doctors. They were like passing me around, and no one would take me because they're like, well, you have this doctor and you have this. I now know that's because of drug trials, because they don't want to mess up their drug trial. I would be a blemish on their record. They don't want to mess up their drug trials. I didn't know that before. I was just like, why won't anyone accept me? I need this. She was like, you need it. Like, she was like, you need to be on a priority list. You need to be in spine surgery now. And it took 2 years, and finally, and still, even though I got into all these clinics, yeah. So, but here's my point. My point is that knowing that about all of the drugs, knowing that America pays more, knowing that there's a law that says that they can't tell us if cash, that cash will be cheaper, they've really ramped up our payments, our co-pays for our drugs. It can be anywhere from like $15 to $30 for our co-pays, where the co-pays used to be 0 to 5. They just suddenly ramped them up to 10, 15, 20. And now they have those new laws on the books where they split your prescription up to like you have to have 3 prescriptions a month. So now you're paying like even more. So what it is that for you to prescribe drugs instead of doing a procedure is a moneymaker for them, because they're paying, the cost of the drug is this much cash. It's $5 cash, but they get us to pay $15 for the drug. And there's no way for us to know about it. And so it's actually profit making for you to prescribe us drugs instead of for you to do procedures on us. And so on the back end, they sell it to you as, all these ways not to do procedures and the reason why. And I just thought of something yesterday, and I really want you to think about this. When I was growing up, Doctors Without Borders would go to third world countries, and you would hear about kids with cleft palates and all these dental problems and all of these things that couldn't get fixed because they didn't have the doctors to do it. And it would be this humane thing of Doctors Without Borders. And what did Doctors Without Borders do? What Doctors Without Borders would do would go out to the third world countries to do procedures not available in third world countries. And we didn't say, how dare you invade their bodies? We thought it was humane for them to fix a physical, disfigurement. And they've got you convinced to not do procedures that they're too risky that will enable a person to walk again. Do you know why they don't want you doing procedures? Because when you do pills, they make a profit. When you do procedures, now the insurance kicks in. It's the one time they pay. There are videos online, and I'll try to find it, of actual insurance guys going out and talking about how many billions they make, how many profitable billions, like 500 billion a quarter, and why it's the best industry to get into because of how profitable patients are, the way the laws are written today. And part of that is the way they've got you guys going with thinking that procedures are just so darn risky. They've got you into a third world thinking pattern. All the advancements of modern medicine are in procedures. Like pills are just covering up symptoms. Pills cover up symptoms. Pills treat the symptoms. Procedures treat the actual physical. They're the solution. Like, do you think I'm going to have to be on as many pills now that I can walk again? It takes down the pain when I can move. Like, when I can move around, I don't have to take like more pills above my like daily. Like, it's a good thing. You know it produces endorphins. You know it produces like a pain-killing thing in the head. You know movement does that. You know it oils the joints and everything like that. And that's modern medicine. What does the U.S. offer if the U.S. doesn't offer procedures? What is modern medicine if it isn't all the procedures and all of, what is it if it isn't what we know how to do on the body? What is it if it isn't all of the amazing things they've given you, the x-ray machines and all the different kind of needles you get? Why is it that so many people are going to third world countries to get their medical care now? Why is that? Why do you think that is? I remember living in California. Everyone was going to Mexico to get their medical care because they couldn't get it from their doctors here. I think they're saying the doctors are over there, and a lot of that, and I understand it. I don't think it's your fault. I think it is excellent marketing. I'll never forget in the 1990s when they switched everything up, when they sold off all of the seats in the medical facility. They switched off for everything. I will never forget when I was growing up and I saw we all knew what the highest paid jobs were in America. Like what were the best paid jobs in the world? And it was always doctor. It was always doctors. The first 3 rows were doctors. And I'll never forget getting online and looking to see who the top 3 payments were. And it changed to sales reps. Like it changed to marketing. And I was just like, what? Like the Mad Men people got up there and doctors fell. And then they fell and then they fell. And that, I know what that was now. I know that was a result of them, of the White House switching out the people. And that was right when they put in the pain clinics and they put in the drugs. And that's right when they started taking out procedures. And if you really think about it, procedures are when you get paid the most. And that means they have to pay you the most. That's what you're trained for. I said it in my pain clinic video. My doctor said it would be so easy to give you an injection. It would be so easy to give you an injection. And I was like, why? How is that different than being in the third world? Like, that's the point. I'm in the USA. It's so easy to give me an injection that gives me the ability to walk, that gives me the ability to move freely, that gives me the ability to go out into my yard, pick up a branch twice the size of me and throw it onto, do you know what I'm saying? And all this time, I thought it was my leg strength. All this time, I thought that I had like all these things. No, I had a spine that was not working. And finally, you know, I know what keeps a lot of you back is because you're looking at the spine. They've really trained you to look at the spine and say, hey, the spine isn't broken, so that must mean there's no damage. And I don't know when you stop thinking that you know, nerves can't be damaged. Every time I see an x-ray of my spine, I'm just like, not just my spine. I remember the first time I saw an x-ray of my body, like really got to look at it. It was of my leg and my knee. And I was just like, what the heck? Because my bone didn't look like any x-ray I'd ever seen on TV, that I'd ever seen online, that I didn't see any. I have like Viking bones. Like I've never broken a bone in my life. I have bones like this big. Like I don't feel bad about not having that weight that everyone said I should have when I was growing up. I'm like, no wonder why. My bones are like this big and they're densey. There's none of that like, you know, like look inside of them. There's none of that like, you know, you kind of looks faded and it has this. And no, it was just like Iron Man. Like my bones were like thunk. And same thing when she was doing the x-ray on my tailbone. Like it was just like, the bone was just like it was opaque. Yeah, flesh isn't like that. Flesh isn't like that. And of course there is like fusing, and that's why I thought I needed spine, you know, things have melded together, and they said it like there's been bulges and there's damage and everything like that. But doctors tend to look and be like, well, you're high, you know, if they don't see a crack going straight through it, they've been trained by the pharmaceutical industry through all of this amazing marketing, you know, because they've trained the human brain, like they've mapped the human brain so well, they've studied it so well that they know the exact words to say. Like I just saw this amazing a thing on the music industry and what they've done to like just get people into how they actually do music that way, to just get them trained to feel comfortable and never wanting to get out of a rut and just being like this, all the music sounds the same. Did you know the music of the last 20 years, all the hits have been written by two people? The same two people of the last 20 years. All the hits by all the pop artists, same two people. Taylor Swift to will.i.am. You guys probably don't know who those are, but my other viewers do. So, and you don't know their names for a reason. They want it that way. And they have the exact same note pattern, like the exact same note pattern, but they do that on purpose. They want you to hear a song and go back into the rut. And that's amazing marketing. Like they know the human brain that well. And so they want to make you feel comfortable and be like, if you don't touch them, there's no risk. There's no risk. And the music even said that. The guy with the music was like, the reason they do it is there's no risk involved. They don't take on a new music group because there's no risk. And that's exactly right. They don't want you to accept every risk. But I find it interesting that people go out into the third world country because they're like, wow, these people have no chance. What's different here? Tell me the difference between my treatment here and in what would have been different in Africa? Because they get a crap ton of drugs in Africa. And that's the problem. That's why Doctors Without Borders goes there. Because they have a crap ton of drugs. They get a crap ton of drugs from the UN and everything else, but they don't have procedures. Tell me what's different. Except that they get their drugs for free. We are, in that respect, we are the piggy bank. They get a third of our paycheck. They get 1/3 of my husband's paycheck. And I don't get disability. We pay more to disability. We pay more to Social Security than we do in taxes to pay for other people's fraudulent disability claims because you can't get turned down for disability. And so like there's just a slew, like they said, they checked out in like 1 year, there was just in one section, they had 1 million fraudulent disability claims and they approved 99.9% of them. So now our Social Security, if you look at your paycheck, it's larger than what you pay in taxes. But I don't get any of that money, even though I've been strapped in bed for 8 years. No, a third of our paycheck goes to you guys, the medical industry. And a lot of that is because we're paying drugs. We've been paying all this money for all this drugs because the doctor opens up my chart and goes, what drug can we put you on? I've actually had doctors open my chart and look through and go, it looks like there's nothing else I can put you on. That's actually like the last 6 doctors said that before I got to the good doctors. And I got to the good doctors because of my insiders, and because of how to find a good doctor. And I did that video here. That's what happened. And so I tell people you have to be proactive. You have to be really, really proactive when you try to get good health care. So I wanted to just encourage you to maybe think about those things, about like why you're a doctor in America and how you're treating your patient any differently than, are they getting any better care than they would in a third world country? And would you really, in a third world country, do they get more than 15 minutes of a person's time? When you go over there, why do they get more of your compassion and time and energy? Why is that person more valuable than a person in the United States of America who's paying so much, such an incredible amount for their care? Why aren't they worth it? Human rights is human rights. We are worth the human dignity. We're worth the human dignity. And I'm like, why do they get the risk and we don't get the risk? Because we're lucky enough to live in a house with a shelter, so you think, oh, you're okay? So it's okay to live with urinary tract infections every other month, 5 times a year, because we can't get me bathed right. You have to get bathed in bed all the time. And it's like impossible to like get the sheets and get me moved off the sheets. Like, have you considered any of those things, of what living conditions are like when you can't move, when you're pinned to a bed? I don't know. Those are just things that I'm wondering if you're considering when you're thinking about the risks. I really wonder if you think about it, like, would you give that, if you were in Africa and the kid had the exact same thing, would you give it to that kid? You know the answer would be yes. I want you to consider why that is. Or if a vet at a clinic, if there was a dog in a clinic that was having the same issue, why are the vets giving out these procedures to dogs and cats and even hamsters, but they're not being done on humans in the United States of America? I would say the term risk in the medical community really means risk to the pharmaceutical companies. Every time they use the word risk in your pamphlets, risk of infection, risk of this, risk, they're saying risk 80 million times because really it's something that takes money out of their pocket. They are never going to tell you, hey, do this procedure. I mean, the pharmaceutical industry they make your decisions now. Every time a decision's made, you have to make it in lieu of the pharmaceutical industry. Well, they're a profit-run business. They're never going to tell you to do a procedure, ever. They're never going to tell you it's a good idea to do a procedure. They're never going to tell you to do that. They're never going to say it's a good idea, ever. They're always going to fight you on that. But their oath is to their profit-sharing people. They go out there and openly do talks about how much money they're making, the billions they make a quarter, openly, and what a great industry it is to be in today because you can just make billions off of the patients. You're either their partner in their profit sharing, or you're partner with the patient and you're in it for their health and you're going to follow through on your Hippocratic oath, which is do no harm. And that means that you're going to look out for the nerves. And it's not nerve pain. That's what they love to say, is that it's pain, but it's nerve damage. There's damage there. And yes, there's yoga breathing and there's this and there's that and everything like that. But a lot of the patients don't know about the balance and this. And this is another thing that I really want you to consider, that I know they're never going to tell you about this. But if a patient has been in pain and it hasn't been treated, because these drugs that they're giving you, they're not designed to take away all of the pain. They're designed to keep them coming back to you asking for more, because that keeps the prescriptions coming and it keeps their profits going. It keeps them coming into you. That keeps their profits up. It keeps the doctor's profits. It gets everything going. It keeps the machine going. So it's not designed to ever end it. The procedures are designed to end it. But they're never going to tell you to do that. So what that does is it puts the patient on there's those two branches of the autonomic nervous system. I think I'm saying it right. And that there's the rest and then there's the fight or flight. And that intense amounts of pain puts them in fight or flight. But if they never get relief from that and they're always in fight or flight, this part of rest, just the tone, it's like a muscle, and it just weakens and weakens and weakens until they're always into fight or flight. Excuse my cats. The nurse put the bowls all together. That's not a good thing when you have territorial animals. But see, I was able to actually get up and switch it just like that. I wouldn't have been able to do that before. Wouldn't have been able to do that at all. The other day, my power cord ran out. Instead of switching to one of the 3 devices that I've had to buy to switch around because I can't change out the power cord, I was able to go and actually get the power cord. And I was like, it's a brand new world. Life is totally different. So, it's just a whole new reality. So, anyway, I need to get back on track. So what happens is that this muscle of the rest goes down and down and down, and then they end up in this section all the time. They end up in fight or flight. So when they come to you, they seem stressed out and just like all the time, and they come to you, and then you're like, well, I'm here to help you out. Why aren't you calm? And I know that it can get you defensive because you're there to help them, and that you're like, well, why aren't you calm? And they're just kind of like, help me, help me. And they seem like, why won't you help me? And like, just, they seem on edge, and they just seem like, they seem fight or flight. It's not personal. It's just because they're in that they don't have rest. It's not, that ability to rest has died. That section of their life has gone away. They don't ever rest. They always live in fight or flight. And it's the same thing with Wall Street. If they live in this thing where they never get to rest, it's always like, go, 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 Wall Street all the time. This starts to die. This starts to die. And so when they get home, and their wife is like, why can't you ever rest for the kids? And the kids start to get abused because the dad's like, this, go, go, go. They're always like, that's because they're out of balance, and they have to get this back in tone again. And there are things you can do. There's these biofeedback. If you go in the medical field of biofeedback with trained, there's a whole medical licensed facility. Not that there's biofeedback. If you go online, you get lost in the field of like astroturfing and all this kind of stuff. But there are licensed professionals who can train your heart rate and your breathing to actually put your heart rate back into rhythm and things like that. And there are things like the ketogenic diet that can help. But I really have to be clear with you, like, when you have nerve damage, these things are coping mechanisms, but they will help with the symptoms, but they will not heal. They're coping techniques, but they will not heal. And they are being prescribed as things to heal the nerves that are damaged out there. And the rate of car accidents are astronomical. If you look at the rate of car accidents since things have been legalized, like the year that marijuana was legalized in Colorado, car accidents increased by 41%. And you look at places where like certain things are happening, the car accidents are insane. And you go out of a car accident and you can get the things that can happen. What happens in those car accidents? It's soft tissue damage. What's soft tissue damage? That's nerves. And you know that a pill can cover up some symptoms, but those nerves, if left untreated, like I had a nurse that she's just a killer nurse. She could do untold things. She was like Superwoman. I found out that like 20 years ago, 15 years ago, turns out she had a block in her lower spine. Like she had some slip or whatever on the job or whatever, and they just went in and put a block on her lower spine, one of those risky procedures, and she's out here being Superwoman. They just blocked her lower spine. So she's out there walking, and I just was like, what? They just blocked your lower spine? They're just like, right, diagnose it, blocking your lower spine. And I remember when I owned my own business and I had a storefront, I had numerous students who had had spine surgeries, and they were all like, the risks were big back then. They were really big, but they were like, it's better than nothing. They were really, and I remember the risk was left up. The doctors gave the risks to the patient and let the patient make the decision. But now doctors just, like, oh, it'd be so easy, but I'm not going to give it to you. And I'm so lucky that I found one doctor, and maybe it's because I ended up having that collapse in the middle of the waiting room. I don't know. And I was just like, I found the one place, it's right here. And I had an SI injection on both sides, but I couldn't believe it. I came in to get the SI, and that doctor that denied me the eventual lower spine procedure, he actually was like, well, maybe we'll just do one side. And I was like, what? Like, what? Like, well, no, he said that about the ablation. So I had these injections, and I remember, like, I was able to sit up on the car ride home from that first injection. Like, I was unable to speak when I got there. Like, I was hunched over, and I was swollen, and I was just like, blah, 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 and I was having a hard time articulating. Like, my husband had to speak for me. They did the injection, and it was just like putting ice in between the joint. And I started to speak. And by the time it was all over, I just lifted up and I was verbalizing. Like I dropped a point like immediately, and by the time we were out, like I was standing straight upright. Like I was upright, and I was like, I don't remember the last time I was upright. I couldn't believe it. I didn't remember the last time I was upright. And that's when I got into that car that I talked about last October. Then they did a second procedure. They did it again 2 weeks later, and that was even better because they did have like it, whatever. And I got to go out and I drove for the first time in like, I don't know how long, in forever. I drove, and then the ablation happened, and bad things and all these things, but now this, and then I drove, but when I went in for the ablation after these 2 procedures worked out so well, I went in for the ablation, and he's like, well, maybe we'll do one side. And I just looked at him like he was insane. And I was like, why would you say that to me? And I actually, because I'm such a good speaker, I just was like, I actually said to him, he said, well, because it's just such a painful procedure. And I said, well, let's see how I handle it. Let's go for both. If I can't handle it, let's do it. Let's just get on the table. Let's see how I handle it. And I was just like, I just won't say anything about the pain. And I did. I just sat there and I was like, if I act like I'm in pain, he'll stop. He won't do both sides. I couldn't believe he said that. After after the 2 procedures before, I just had been up, and I couldn't believe he was offering to do one side after I was up. And, the second one, I was out and driving and having life. I started teaching. I started teaching dance workshops again. Granted, I was sitting down, but I was going out into a dance studio. Didn't have that life before. That life was gone. My YouTube channel, you'll see it. I suddenly start standing up. That was after the injections. I suddenly start standing up in my videos out of nowhere. I'm in bed forever. Then suddenly I'm standing up. That's the injections. And so I wanted to present that as maybe just something to consider, that putting us on pills is a huge profit-making machine, because they have upped those copays because they cost more than the actual cash price for them. And in New Zealand, there's an amazing documentary. In New Zealand, all the drugs are $5. All the drugs, the same drugs we get here, they're all $5. Do you know why that is? They just did a competitive market. I'll show you right here. They did a documentary on it. Not here in the United States. It was done investigative journalism elsewhere. They did an amazing thing, and it was just competition, and it drove all the prices down. They opened it up, the whole market, to everyone, and it drove all the things down for $5. All the prescriptions, $5. And that's why copays used to be $0, because drugs are insanely cheap. You know what I mean? They say, oh, we need the money. We need the money. No, that's like football clubs saying we need taxpayers to pay for our big stadiums. No, that most of it is like taxpayer funded. And have they progressed all that much besides making new drugs? No. Do they release any of the stuff that they actually make? Is it most of the studies that they do tailored to fit one narrative or another? Don't they guide your drug studies? And why are so many of the studies just for drugs instead of what is the new cure for something? It's fascinating. It really, really is. And I just would encourage you to consider that the next time you flip through somebody's chart and say, what drug can I put them on? Or next time you flip through and you say, oh, only a drug can fix this. I really encourage you to research back to 1996 when the White House changed and Oxycontin was introduced, and suddenly pain clinics were developed, because we didn't have pain clinics before that. I highly encourage you to look back and look what things were being done before then. Before then, nerve damage was being treated physically. Before then, we didn't have massive addiction rates and massive methadone deaths started by Oxycontin. But no, they changed policy. No procedures. If they have the nerve damage, then they need the drug that we just produced. And you can either be a partner with the profiteers, or you can be a partner with health, because if you went into a third world country, there's no way you would deny them the procedure. So why are you denying your patients the procedure? You either provide first world care with the procedures, you provide the risks involved to your patients, and you let them decide like you used to do before the White House changed and before the pharmaceutical industry took over and started making it a for-profit industry, and start letting, we're either going to be, the United States of America, which is first world. You're either going to start looking at your patients as a piggy bank, and, don't forget that you make your money too on procedures and they don't want to pay you. So those are just things to consider that I've put together, and you have a choice. And if you want to go out to private practice, it's cheaper for patients. It's hella cheaper for patients. What's wrong with that? What is wrong with that? All right. That's what I have to say. So much for me keeping it short. Didn't happen that way. I hope you liked it anyway. And I hope you share with other doctors. I highly encourage you to share with other doctors. And then the last thing I would recommend is that you do videos. Like, encourage your patients to make videos. You need to see what their life is like at home. Maybe get, a video sharing network or something like that. Don't make them post it on YouTube or anything like that. But having patients record their pain teaches you a lot, and it teaches them a lot. I know I learned a lot. I wouldn't have remembered what my life was like comparatively. I mean, the reason I have such good memories, that's why my memory, I have to keep correcting like what life was like in those 8 years, because before I started filming, it's foggy. It's like, it's in this kind of like haze of just torture and pain. And recording makes it very, very still. And it also makes the person realize that there's something other. It makes them, it makes them want to be more than their pain. It makes them fight for themselves harder. Because they, it does something. So it's good. They discover things and they put connections together. So it's kind of like writing. There's all these studies on writing. So, and how good it is to connect dots and things like that. So in the old days, people used to journal everything, and that's how great leaders figured things out. But people used to record everything. That's how movies are made on them. That's how the King's Speech was made. It was made on that. And that's how the Duchess was made, all on their journals. So it's kind of like an online journal. If you could think about something like that, it would be smart. I'd like to do that with my doctor. Now I'm going to be talking to her about maybe writing a book with her or doing something like that, a program. So because we've come so far, I really look forward to doing that maybe when this is all over. And it can be about from wheelchair to walking. But that would not have happened without procedures. And I want you guys to remember that. And you have to tell a patient. Can't just be like, oh, think it in your head. Well, you're just bad all over. You need to be like, well, tell me. Like, ask specific questions. Be like, well, where does it hurt the worst? Because I didn't know the name for where it hurt the worst. Like, that's what I really want to be clear about. Like, I actually had patches over my SI joints when I came in the first day. I said, I'm always wearing patches right here. And it was bam, bam over the SI joints. Well, I didn't know the SI joints existed. Who does? Who talks about sacroiliac joints in America? Who? I had to learn about them on a YouTube video. And I was like, oh my, what? Everyone just says lower back. Lower back pain. Oh, lower back pain. Lower back. No one says SI joint pain. Everyone says lower back pain. It would be really great if people would stop saying lower back pain and start saying sacroiliac joint pain. Because I would have said, my sacroiliac joint hurts. Do you imagine how many people's lower back pain would be solved if they just had an SI joint injection? Do you know? Like, I see people online, they are tortured. They are tortured. I know my father was tortured. My father was tortured with it. Tortured, the things he went through. Now I know what it was. So it's part of it may be hereditary. That's the reason it went the worst. But I walked into my doctor's office with 2 patches straight over it. And I still remember, I look back now and I remember the intern there was saying like, well, I think we need to do an injection. She was arguing for an injection. And I remember she was getting upset with my doctor, but my doctor wanted to move slow and she prescribed me a pill. And granted, the pill did unfurl me, but that girl, and to this day, now I think about it, I'm like, I wonder what injection she wanted to do. Because that girl was really like, I really think she needs an injection. She really needs an injection. And that was 2 years ago. Like, what life would I have had for 2 years if I had gotten an injection all the way back then? Would I have written, how many books would I have written again? Would I have gone back to authoring books? Would I have had this channel 2 years ago? How life, what have I missed? Because they wanted to move slow, And notice also if your patient doesn't come in very often, if there's long periods between when your patient comes in, don't think that's because they don't want to see you. It means they've had to cancel appointments. They're too sick to get to you. That's a big red flag. That means their home life is really, really, really bad. So really look for that. Yeah, really keep that in mind. Say, it's been a while since you've been here. Is there a reason why? Find out, and then find out why. And then the last thing I would say is if you can, this came up in my last appointment, if you can really try and get, someone said this, really try and get a functionality quiz. One of my doctor's office does this. They have a functionality test that we have to fill out before we go in, but it's not a very good one because it just asks about that joint. And, what if your patient doesn't have, it's really hard to answer that joint when you have more than one thing going on. A lot of patients have more than one thing going on. But the normal functionality test has about 80 questions. So it's good to have that on the intake form, like the functionality test from physical therapy offices, to have that 80 questions to find out exactly what your patient's functionality is. It tells you what their lifestyle is. Functionality is like, are you able to do the dishes? How many times a day are you able to get out of bed? Are you able to use the restroom? Are you able to take a shower? Because that's very different skill sets. I'm able to use the ladies' room. I cannot take a shower. Even now, I still can't take a shower. So I'm trying to work up to that. So I think the hips are big. You need your hips to be stable. I'm noticing. Like I fell a couple times the other day, but I think that's part of the thing we talked about before. I just fell straight, boom. But I think that's the other thing. So it can really screw with your balance or whatever. And so that's part of the strength training that I need to do. And so I think I'm going to add the Pilates back in on top of because my physical therapy hurts so much. The pain from the hips just screams, but the Pilates doesn't. And so I'm like, at least the Pilates will strengthen my core. And I don't scream in pain. So when I can't do the physical therapy, at least I'll do the Pilates so I have something building. Do you know what I mean? So at least I'm building something because the Pilates don't hurt my hips. So I'm going to try and build something, and maybe I'll try and do the Pilates with a flexed foot, right? So anyway, but that functionality test might really, really help you actually know where your patient is. Because I think my doctors are slowly learning what really life is like, because they see me, because I always brought in a walker. I think they think I was using that walker out there. No, I don't use my walker on a daily basis. I use that walker to crawl in because I can't afford a wheelchair. The walker was cheaper, And recently I was like, we can afford a wheelchair. Maybe I should finally get that, And my friends were like, if you get a wheelchair, you'll never walk again. And I was like, so I didn't get the wheelchair. But the reality is that I really needed a wheelchair. I could barely, I'd be dragging, my husband would have to wheel me in. But I use a walker every day. Are you kidding me? No, we got it, just because it was the cheapest thing we could get and he could wheel me around. But it fooled the doctor into thinking that I somehow used a walker every day. I'm like, no, even though I said, I'm locked in bed every day. So that functionality test will really help you. Does that make sense? It'll really help you out. Because I know you really want to think positive. You want your patients to think positive all the time. You need to remember you're there to help, and your patient, think about that scene in Gone with the Wind. Can you imagine when they were all in the tents and all those soldiers were wounded and hurting, can you ever imagine a doctor going to any of those patients and telling them to think positive and to talk, less negatively? Can you? Even watch movies in the 90s, like Air Force One, what was it? The Fugitive. I think it was The Fugitive. Look at how hospitals were portrayed then. The doctors were so different to their patients. They're so protective of them. Protective of the patients. Don't anybody touch that patient. So protective. And the hospital is calm and quiet and everything. And I know it's just the culture that the pharmaceutical companies are in charge, and they want you to do the opposite. They want you to keep us sick, if not sicker. And it's just a profit thing. And so I'm just asking you to consider that. All right, I've made it huge. I love you guys, and have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the year saving your patients instead of hurting them. Because you are harming them if you leave them in pain. That's harm. If you leave them in pain without seeking out all options, that's harm. If you see them going doctor to doctor to doctor, if they are begging you to get them out, they're asking for solutions. There are people who come to you and say, just keep giving me the pills and I'll be okay. But you know that's not the case. Most of them are asking for solutions. Those people don't want to be on the pills. That means that those nerves need to be blocked or ablated. All the things we used to do. We're a first world country, aren't we? Or are we? Are we just like Africa, where we profit off the people, lords and serfs? That's not what you went to school for. Peace out. Donation link below if you want to help out with my medical bills, because you know they're huge. It's a great way to say thank you. And I thank you, all you doctors who are sharing this and who do help their patients. You're one in a million. And we love you. We love you. Well, maybe not one in a million, but it's hard. It's hard with what they're doing. I get it. Bye.